Welcome to Yes Also. I'm Susie Barrett. My guest today is the co-founder of the Pack Theater in Los Angeles, Brian James O'Connell. Brian is a founding board member and teacher at Camp Improv Utopia, and he's a filmmaker who directed the movie Bloodsucking Bastards with Pedro Pascal. Brian did all of his improv training at ioWest and for years was basically the mayor of ioWest. He wore a million hats. He was on a bunch of teams, Herald teams, house teams, cage match teams, the team Dr. God, which he still plays with, and he was a teacher, coach, director, and even the bar manager. It was cool to talk to Brian about the origin and philosophies behind the Pack, and also to catch up about what he's been doing now, teaching on the road and showing people how to do a form that he developed called the ladder. We've got some great pics of Brian from his I.O. days and beyond over on our Instagram page at YesAlsoPod, so head on over there after you listen to the episode. And if you like the show and you have a minute to give us a rating or a review, we would be forever grateful. All right, let's get to the episode. You were just saying off mic that your whole family is from Chicago, but you grew up in North Carolina and didn't have the exposure to improv that Chicago people would.
No, I did not. I grew up in a small town called High Point, North Carolina. It has two nicknames. It's the furniture capital of the world.
Can I guess the second one?
Oh, boy, it's going to be great for you. Yeah, go for it.
Rollin' Greens.
Our nickname, ironically enough, is Little Chicago. We're the, Yeah, we're the 259th largest city in America, but we're currently number 34 in murders per capita.
You're the second city.
Yes, actual Chicago is number 28, I think now. So I learned, the only thing I knew about improv was Whose Line, like everybody else, but I thought, that's in England, that's something they do in a foreign country, not here, and also B, that's something for like once you're already successful.
Yeah.
And then once I found ioWest in 2003 and then did a modicum of research, furious at all of my family, like all those summer vacations, all those family reunions, never once anybody was like, hey, Brian likes comedy, we should take him to a Second City show.
Right.
My my Aunt Kathy, who was my godmother, would have loved to have had me in high school living with her for 6 weeks to take like the IO summer intensive. I know my parents would have loved to get me out of the house.
Why did they keep this from you?
I don't know. The only long form I knew about before I moved to Los Angeles, I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts for college, and it had
with a goal to do what? Acting,
film. Yeah. Originally the idea was like, I like to be in movies. I should learn how to make movies, and then also it just did kind of all. I like to write. I was in bands. I played music, so I was like, this is all together. And then a couple of guys, John Daly and Brett Gelman, who were a year behind me in the School of Drama, and then Alex Nold, who was also a drama student, but also like raconteur. Everyone he played cello on Built to Spill's like first album, and then Vadim Newquist. They were in a 4-person long form improv show that they did on a weekend in the Commons, and they were called The Wings of Larry Bird.
Wow, I love that.
Couldn't go see it because I was working on crew for my classes.
Oh,
so.
man.
Yeah.
You were saying all those guys went there, and then John Daly and Brett Gelman, they went to New York before.
Yeah,
LA.
they went to New York. They did, Cracked Out, and I don't know if they were on Mother or no, Death by Ruru was that.
And you moved to LA with the goal of being a filmmaker
first. Yes. New York's not much for me. I don't particularly care for the hustle and bustle, but also it was mostly at that time, Atlanta wasn't really a thing yet. Wilmington definitely wasn't a thing yet. And so if you wanted to work in the film business, it was New York and LA. And I'm like, if I'm going to be poor, I'm going to be poor and warm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with slightly lower rent?
At the time, slightly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my first place I moved in with my fiance and her two roommates in August 28th of 2000, and then she left me on Halloween an hour before I had to be at work. And then
boo, I'm leaving.
Boo, I'm leaving. Also, boo. So they took pity on me and held me in, and I think that was a duplex house. The people who owned it lived next door. And then there was the three of us. I think my rent was like $450.
Oh God! Oh my God! It makes me want to barf and cry.
Yeah, it does. And a 2-story house.
Bless.
Yeah.
Wow.
Ton of space.
Amazing.
Yeah.
The dream that is no more.
No, impossible.
Right. So you moved here in 2000, and then you said you discovered ioWest in 2003.
That is correct.
How did you discover it?
A girl I dated in college, Rebecca Brown, now Rebecca Zanavsky. I dated in college, and we stayed friendly afterwards, and she was like, you should come see my improv show. And I said, sure, when is it? She was like, it's 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. I'm like, well, I'm broke. I don't have HBO, so I'm not going to be watching like Sopranos or 6 Feet Under. I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll come and see it. And that was Tiger Pants. And they,
oh, wow.
Yeah, they just happened to have the greatest show they'd ever done. I was like, I have to do this. And then the house manager came out at the end like, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. If you like what you saw tonight, you can sign for like I ran downstairs to the box office, and then the poor box office intern just trying to close up. I was like,
you're grabbing them by the lapel.
Yeah, like I literally put my hand on the swinging wood door. And I was like, classes here, I can. And they're like, oh, that was January 19th of 2003. I had just missed sign up for level 1. And they're like, but the office opens at noon on Mondays, and they're always taking people for sign up. So 12:01, credit card in one hand, cell phone in the other.
Amazing. Was there something in particular that hooked you or grabbed you in that first show, or was it just the general idea?
Yeah, I can still remember quite a bit of it. So there was Brett Pearson's invented a kite that you could put your kids in, and he became a billionaire off of that. And at one point, he was on a picnic date with Rebecca's character, and he was trying to impress her by juggling, and then he like leaned back on his back and then started pretending that he was juggling with his feet and his hands. And I was like, that's insane. What are you like doing space work? And then Pete Carboni came by in the background, just doing a Canadian cross, just looking up the sky and going, Kevin, as if he had lost his kid in the kite. And I was like, what is this? How so I think it just had all the bits that I liked. It had acting, it had comedy. I was a big sketch and stand-up nerd, and watching all that stuff, probably younger than I should have. And then it felt like a team sport. I played soccer for years and years, and then also I was on the debate team in high school, and then being in bands and having that sort of, friendship and collaboration. Like Miles says, like being a good improv team is like being in a gang. Like you all hang out together and you all dress the same, you do stuff. And I was like, oh, this has the stuff I'm missing. And for like the first 3 years, like, I said I got here in 2000 in August, and then the girl, left me on Halloween. And then it was just 3 years of like working at a pool hall, making money off the side after hours, running games, and then just feeling sorry for myself. And it was my roommate's girlfriend, Erica Zonder, who was a manager at Messina Baker at the time, was just kind of hip pocketing me and just kind of like brought me in the office. She was like, what are you doing? You got to get out there. You got to do stuff. Like, you're great, but like, you want to do this, right? Like, it's great that you have all your friends from School of the Arts, but like, no, none of you are famous. None of you can help each other. You got to expand your circle. And I was like, well, I'm going to see a show.
That whole chapter sounds like such a movie.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, you said working in a pool hall, running games after hours. What does that mean?
I worked at the Hollywood Billiards because when I got here, I was like, well, this money isn't going to last. I'm going to need to get a job. And so I was bartending and running the place during the day. And then I think the statute of limitations has probably run out at this day. So it's all like regulars and celebrities, and then also like pool sharks and hustlers and guys who just play professionally for a living or semi-professionally. So what I would do is we would close up. My doorman would just hang out. I'd pay him under the table, and then I would keep anywhere from 3 to 6 tables going, where I was basically just like the house. Those guys would play either 24-1 continuous or 9-ball, like race to 12, and just kind of like in poker, we have a big blind, little blind. They both put the big blind and the little blind in. Whoever lost didn't get their money back, and then the big blind just paid me like a percentage of whatever they won from that guy. Sort of like, hey, thanks for keeping them. None of them drank, so it wasn't like I was pouring beers.
Right.
So it's anywhere to like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and I was making, I don't know, maybe close to $1,000, $1,500 a night in cash.
Wow.
Just to hang out and watch TV and read.
Oh my God.
while they gambled.
This is wild.
Yeah, fun times.
Fun times.
Yeah, and I date and live with a prosecutor now. So
Oh.
yes.
So you're immune.
Yeah.
That's how that works. Yeah.
Yes.
I also flagged, I want to reverse for a second. You
Please.
used the term Canadian cross. I've never heard that before.
Oh, that's just a walk on that never stops.
Yeah.
I learned that
cool.
from Brendan McLaughlin. He used to be on Dr. Guy because he hated walking into people's scenes to do one line.
Yes.
And then now you're part of the scene. He's like, no. So I don't know who came up with Canadian cross.
I love that.
Just
yeah.
like, you know,
just a nice, gentle, polite walk through.
Just in the background, like, oh, guys, we're really getting killed on the lunch rush out there. Like, oh, I just got triple sat. You just keep walking.
Yes, you just keep walking.
Just keep walking.
Right. I mean, we all learn that, or at least those of us who studied at IO, the first rule of walk-ons is walk off.
Yes.
But you don't always get to. If you stop walking and someone grabs you in dialogue, then you feel obligated to continue the conversation.
Man, I'm just another person in this grocery store. I don't need to be
I
part
didn't
of your.
mean to be. No.
I can't remember if it was Khaki or Miles who said it was like the urge to walk on is the urge to edit. Like you probably should have just edited it.
Oh, that's a great adage. Yeah. Okay, so you do IO.
Yeah.
Was it? Did you take to it? Was it easy for you?
Immediately, it felt very healing. I mean, I was incorrigible to start with. You know, I mean, I was 27. I'm a straight white guy who has been doing nothing but inhaling comedy his entire life. Of course, I thought, I got to be in every scene, and yay.
I know how to do this.
Yeah, I know how to do all of this. This is great. But I really, really took to it. It became like lifeblood, especially where I was in the time of my life where I was like, I didn't have anything good going on, and I was still very sad. So this was helpful. And then I paid for level 1. I heard that you could do internships, and I was like, oh, I can keep my money good. And then they needed someone to do like physical plant stuff, like build things and carpentry. I'm like, I'm from the furniture capital of the world. I didn't do any of it, but and also I think it was because I was an athlete, and let's be honest, I wasn't a 90-pound soaking wet, sketch comedy nerd. They're like, oh, you can actually lift boxes. We can send you to Home Depot, and you won't be like scared.
My thumb.
Yeah. So I paid for all of my classes after that, being the intern.
Cool. Yeah. And that's my experience of you. Like, I started doing stuff at ioWest in like, I think 05-ish or 06.
Yeah.
And you were already like well established, and you were bartending as well, I think.
I was bartending, and I became the bar manager when Britton quit. When Britton Spellings quit. And so I went from being the bar back to the bar manager. It came down between me and Nick Bush, and it's just because I had the experience of bar managing at Hollywood Billiards, which was 27,000 square feet, 40 tables, and all that. If I doubt Mike Click would have hired me if he had known.
It was
the
weird
story I just told you about Hollywood Billiards.
I did find it weird that when I was just trying to order a vodka soda, you were trying to shove me into an illegal billiards game. But I didn't think anything of it.
That's a bit good for you, Susan. Come on,
come on. So being a person who grew up as like a comedy nerd, consuming comedy,
for sure.
When you were taking classes at IO, did you learn anything that was surprising to you about the craft or about like the science of comedy or how to do it? Did it unravel anything that you had assumed about it?
Yeah, I guess for me, because all my background was in stand-up and sketch, which is ironic. I'm known as like the improv guy, and I'm just like, I've been doing sketch comedy since I was like 15. I guess I was surprised about like how much fun you could have doing it, and how the collaborative idea of it, and a high tide raises all ships, and building off the other person's idea, because my knowledge of comedy was either stand-ups, which is a very, lone gunslinger by yourself. All my guys were Robin Williams, Carlin, Pryor, Bill Hicks, all that, like loners and rebels. And then sketch comedy, all the sketch guys, like I'm a big Kids in the Hall guy. That's but also like Monty Python, all that. It was like being in The Who. Like you were making great art, but you're also constantly in fist fights and struggling. So to get into improv, and everyone's like, that's great. And then we can do that too. And then we'll all do it together. I think it also helped that the first people I ever had in improv were a murderer's row. My teachers were Paul Valancourt for level 1, level 2 was Scott Robinson, level 3 didn't go great. And I'll just not say that person's name.
Gloss over it, yeah.
Yeah. And then 4, 5, and 6 was Bob Dassey, Miles Stroth and Craig Kukowski.
Unbelievable.
So
yeah.
I'm just getting the good heroin.
Yeah.
all the way
The
through.
last three of those guys, those were three of my teachers at IO in Chicago.
Yeah,
when I was coming up.
who are your
Yeah.
other teachers in Chicago?
Level 1 was TJ Jagodowski.
Wow.
Level 2 was Paul. What was Paul's last name? Paul Grandi. That was
Paul
his
Grandi!
name. Yeah.
There it
Jeez.
is.
Level 3 was Liz Allen, but with
Fantastic.
messing as subs for 2 of the weeks. Level 4 I took twice, once with Bob Dassey and once with Khaki. 5A was TJ again. 5B was Noah Gregoropoulos.
Oh, yes.
And I guess I lied about Miles.
All
I
right,
feel like I
R.I.P..
just talked to Miles a lot at the bar and
Yes.
like got nuggets from
Yes.
him.
That's
Yeah.
that's how I got him to eventually take me under his wing. Is that we had rehearsals and or class, and being the Irish Catholic that I am, I could sit at the bar, drink with him, not bother him. Right? Sports Center would be on the TV, and he'd be like, "You like basketball, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, look at that dunk. That's crazy. Like a windmill is it back." And then I also would just be sort of nearby, and then somewhere between round 2 and round 4 of his Bud Light and Ruppelmans, he would turn to me and be like, "You know what your problem was in class?" And I'm like, "Yay, free coaching!"
Yeah. So what was it? What would he point out your problem was?
Oh, I was we talk about, Pirate Robot Ninja,
Yeah.
Billy Merritt and Will Hines stuff. I was an incorrigible pirate. Like he was beating me into submission to like you got some great ideas. The problem is that you have them all at once, and you try to make every scene about all of them. Don't do that. So yeah, like I mean, I wouldn't wear shoes in class. I'd be barefoot. Like yeah, just
Why?
I don't know. Like I don't know what my thought process
Ryan, why?
was.
It's also so unsafe.
Yes.
Stages always have like nails and.
I mean
screws
during
around.
rehearsal, not
Right.
in shows.
Okay.
Oh, God forbid. No.
Oh yeah, but I mean the
Also,
classes.
it's filthy.
It's filthy.
It's filthy.
Yeah, and that building was filthy.
Yes.
Yeah, even that back room, the back classroom. Yeah, that's hilarious.
I have video because here's the psychopath that I am. I used to tape our rehearsals and then go home and watch them immediately afterwards. And so I have rehearsals from like 04 and 05 where we're just started working with Miles and the Bunny Squad, our deconstruction team. I'm less crazy then, but you can still see sort of like the broiness.
Yeah.
The frat guy that was never in a fraternity. I went to an art school, so.
So what finally made it click for you? Was it that you were so hungry to get better at this thing you were passionate about,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you're really taking Miles's advice to heart?
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that the click? You were like, I've got to stop being so piratey.
Yeah, I mean, it's also too is like studying with him. I got him in level 5. It's funny because in level 4 I was in a cage match team, and that was back in the day when if you won 10 cage matches in a row, you got retired because there was only only a few teams that had ever done it. And now you look now of like Convoy and Freedom Snatch and
They go for like a year or more.
Yeah,
Hibeki
Drysdale.
Drysdale,
Yeah. To the point where like Heather and Miles went so long, then Becky and Heather went so long that they had to play each other. Like
Right.
Heather had to do both shows.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I wanted them to do 100. I kept telling Heather that I was like, do 100. No, just put it out of reach. Have someone have to like win for an entire year and go, fuck,
Yeah.
we're only halfway done. And she was like, but that means I would have to do it. I don't want to do that. I was like, fair. Yeah, and then so we were going for number 10, and Miles and oh God, why am I blanking on her name? She did she's a successful TV writer now. It'll come to me. Both of them heard, what? A bunch of level 4 students are going to get, absolutely not. No way they're going to win cage match and get retired. They're not girl team balls. So they put together like a super group to destroy us. And they did. They just went out and had an incredible show. We got hammered, we lost, and then we had the last week of level 4 with Dassey, week 8. And Scott Rose came in and said, do you know who's going to be our teacher next term? That old guy from the cage match. And we're like, no, F that guy. And then we went in next week, all of our arms crossed, like, this guy. And then like within the first 5 minutes of Miles talking, I was like, whatever you're selling, I'm buying.
Do you remember what won you over about what he was saying?
His stuff was, I have a pretty dark sense of humor. And his stuff was like dark, but he was also sort of matter of fact. A lot of my stuff, it's funny because I do a lot of comedy, but a lot of the stuff I get hired to do is all horror, or the last 4 things I wrote that someone asked me to write. Quadruple homicide in Mandan, North Dakota, serial killers in Houston, true crime, and then the official adaptation of the Anarchist Cookbook. So I'm a show that'll never get made. What legal department would let a studio do that?
What would they? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I learned 2 things from the Anarchist Cookbook.
Yes.
That my brother had a copy.
Of course, we all did.
Yeah. One was send letters for free by reversing the return address and the actual address. And then when they return to sender, it goes to the place.
It goes to the person you wanted in the first place.
Yeah. And the other one was if you pour salt water in a vending machine, it'll short circuit and kick out all the quarters and you get a bunch of change. I obviously never did either of those. I'm too good.
Of course, you would never.
I would never.
Wink.
I am not an anarchist, and I hate cooking with recipes.
Yes.
I'm more of a freeform cook.
Yes, I'm going to toss it in.
Yeah.
But, so I've always been into like the banality of evil. And so there was just something about Miles, just matter of fact, like there's dark things in the world. And here's how you laugh at them and make them funny. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. And then just
kindred spirits.
Yes, for sure. I'm Miles Jr. I make no bones about it. Funny, I'm going to go see him on Friday. Like 6 weeks ago, I was hanging out with him. He was like, I was on a podcast the other day, and I said this. I wanted to check with you if it's okay. I called you my protege. Is that all right? That's not insulting, is it? I was like, it's been 20 years. I think it's safe to say.
Right.
Yeah. Also, you did another podcast where you told them that you built me from nothing, that you made me out of sticks and twigs. Of course, protege. I remember him. He was nothing before he met me. That's one of his favorite jokes too, which I'm sure he's only half pretending. He's like, "Oh yes, I remember when I invented pretending."
Invented pretending. Yeah. Great line.
Yeah.
I'm dying to get him on the pod. Tell him when you see him.
You just have to go to his house.
I don't want to.
He will talk to you all day.
I don't want to.
He sits on his back porch. He does all of his work is on the laptop for the pack. He teaches his classes online.
Really?
Oh yeah. The big silver lining for the pandemic for him, it was like, I never have to drive into Hollywood again and be in person. I can teach people from South Africa. Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that was a silver lining for all of us, I think, is like, broadening the reach of improv. So let's cut forward. Oh, you played, was Dr. God your team at ioWest?
That was my main team, yeah. I was a fan of Dr. God before I joined. Me and Neil had a 2-person show that we did, Neil Gargiulo, and both our show and Dr. God got into the Providence Improv Festival in Rhode Island. And since not everyone could go and they were shorthanded, I sat in with them. It's a very easy weekend to remember because we did our show and then we drove up to Boston because Sean Cowg is from Boston and hooked us up with some paid shows at either Improv Asylum or Improv Boston. I forget which one. And on the drive from Providence to Boston is when we found out about the car going through the bar at I.O. And then so we did those shows, and then the week we got back, and then Monday Neil called me and said, "Hey, would you like to join Dr. God?" And I said yes, and then I hung up on him so he couldn't change his mind. And I was so very happy.
Great tactic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, click.
The old yes click. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did your improv get better when you played with them?
Oh yeah. For sure. We are the brothers we never had. All of us have older sisters, and Neil is an only child. So we're the brothers we never had. We just got real lucky that all of us complement each other very well. We certainly do different things, but like a core, I'd say 80 to 85% of what we think is funny, we all agree. Mm-hmm. And it's with all the same references and all the same factors. And again, it's, the old adage of knowing people better off stage, be able to play with them better on stage. Like that was us all the time. Hung out, did everything together, all of us had different little factions that we would do inside it. And then the idea of like high tide raises all ships, like all roads lead to Dr. God. It's great. You go book this thing, because then that means that's a person that we can then have to be an Armando host for our revival show. For you guys go do this, and then we'll hire you on as writers. Or like, oh, you guys did this. Oh, it's a talking head show. You guys can come in and do, make like $200, being a talking head on this.
Which I feel is a gift of being in improv in general. The team sportness of it, not just in our isolated teams, but in the whole community. It's like the spirit of reaching out to each other, putting people on stuff is so wonderful.
Yeah. I call the Dr. God friends and family now. You're in it. You've played with us. You've done stuff. It's like you're on it. Dwayne Colbert, Beth Russell, Tim Jennings, Marshall Givens, Parvesh, like
the ripple effect family.
Yes, for sure. It's funny. I was on the way up here. My producer was like, "Hey, I just gave the Anarchist Cookbook to this new company," and I was like, "Oh, okay. Oh, what have they done? Oh, they did the Harper family. Oh, that's Karen Gracci and Sarah Ballardini, and then Naima did some stuff. I think Laura Kraft is there." I was like, "Oh, I know a ton of people. So nothing else. Icebreakers." Right. Oh, you guys worked with Karen Gracci. She's great. Did you know that she was the original choice by Miles to be in the 2-person show Zumpf, but she couldn't do it because she just made Second City ETC, so then he picked Dan Bacadol. I didn't
know that.
Bacadol was the second choice.
Wow.
Yep. She wanted to do it, but she had just gotten ETC.
She booked Second City. Wow. The lore. Yeah. When I was in classes at IO, Zumpf was like my main show that I would watch to learn from watching. Yeah, they were the TJ and Dave before TJ and Dave started doing 2prov there. Yeah.
I got lucky that I was on my way to Maine for a fish show. So we stopped in Chicago. We went and saw the Cubs play the Padres, and then we walked over to IO. Even though I was the bar manager at IO, I still had to buy a goddamn ticket. Thanks, Sharna.
Yeah. Shout out to Sharna.
And they went up at 1 a.m. and crushed it.
Yeah.
I still remember a ton of that show, and I was like, oh my God. And
what in particular impressed you about the show?
Oh, that everything moves so fast but so fluid. The internal edits, just knowing each other backwards and forwards. They told a whole story about a kid who was on the baseball two guys that were on the high school baseball team, and they were going to throw a party, and they were going to get laid for the first time. So they had gotten a keg, and they had prostitutes, and then they followed the prostitutes hitchhiking to get to the party. The parents on their way to visit grandparents and leaving the two guys by themselves for the first time, but not sure, but I got a bad feeling. And they turn around and they pick up the prostitutes as hitchhikers and bring them to the house. The party starts. He had one of them had Miles had invited a guy named Ronnie from the team. And then he was like, why'd you invite Ronnie from the baseball? Oh, they weren't on the baseball team. Ronnie was on the baseball team. They're like, why'd you invite Ronnie from the baseball team? I hate Ronnie. I'm going to beat his ass. Yeah, but he's going to bring the whole baseball team. And then they go off to play Ronnie like, Mother, I've put on my best cravat. I feel like you're correct. I'm finally going to make friends. And then specifically Miles playing every member of the baseball team, entering the party by taking a step onto the stage. So he was over by where the piano used to be in the family reunion.
Stage left.
Yeah, stage left. He took one step, played a different character, took a step back, took a new step up, played another character, did it 9 times in a row, played all 9 guys from the baseball team. And then when the parents came home, they kicked everybody out. And then I remember the parents coming in, and then Miles and Dan being the kids, and like, what do we do? Just stay still. They're like dinosaurs. If you don't move, they can't see you. And then they just froze against the back wall. And then I remember distinctly Miles being frozen, Dan stepping out, pretending to be the dad. I know they're here somewhere, and him putting his palm on Miles's forehead and leaning and then tapping his finger on Miles's forehead, like, I know those boys are here somewhere. And I was just like, and this is, so long ago that Nomar Garcia Parra was on the Cubs. And I just remember so much of it going like, this is incredible. And then they ended. And before he came over and said hello, I turned to my dad. I was like, that's the guy that's looking out for me in LA. You feel better now? And my dad goes, no. Holy shit. That's one of the darkest things ever. But he was laughing the whole time.
Right.
He totally got it. And then I remember that. And then of course I remember as we're leaving, my dad's disabled. He was in a car accident in 78. He walks on straight arm crutches. And as we were leaving, Sharna was still there holding court at the table. And I was like, Sharna, this is my father. I want you to meet my dad. And she made him walk over to her.
Oh, God.
Instead of
Sharna.
getting up and walking over to him,
Come
like
on, Sharna.
letting the disabled man at 2:30 in the morning
Oh, my God.
walk over to her so that he could shake her hand and say hello. And
It's a real log line when you meet Sharna's character in a screenplay. It's like, Sharna, middle-aged woman, makes disabled people walk to her.
Yes. Yeah. That's usually one of the times I go to of like a shorthand when people ask me, like, is she as bad as you say she is? And I was like, let me tell you a personal story.
I'll tell you a personal story that involves you that I remember.
Go, please.
In the waning days of ioWest, when like money was bad and the kingdom was sinking, Sharna was making us buy bottles of water. We didn't have like a green room with bottled water, so I was buying my $2 or $3 bottle of water, and I got it, and it was like the bottle was kind of like crinkly. And the seal wasn't on it, and I was like, "Hey, I think someone already opened this." And you were shaking your head, and you were so ashamed. You were like, "Sharna is making us refill and wash the bottles and refill them with filtered tap water." I was like, "No, I'm not buying a $3 water that someone has drank that's now tap water."
Yeah. And also keep in mind, like, that's an immediate B health score rating.
Yeah, if B. She should hope for a B.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it, but that, I mean, that's, there we go.
Humiliating. I'm like, let me just give, let's just give Susie Barrett, improv veteran and legend at this place.
And also human being.
The shittiest thing of all time. And then now you can't lie to them when they ask why this is being done.
God, I felt for you because it's like, I know that it's like, oh God, I know her character. Anyway, this is not that podcast.
No, it's not.
But
it's not, but it can be.
It can be if we want it, but we don't. Amazing that Zumpf show in its entirety still lives in your brain, and I'm so glad you have a better memory than me, because I remember loving those shows. I don't remember many details from it.
It's a blessing and a curse.
But one of the magic tricks of those shows was them playing so many characters and holding it all together, and the pace never suffered. It would be like one jumping to one, and both of them knowing what the other one was being. Have you done two-prov yourself?
A ton, yeah.
Yeah.
That was me and Neil Gargiulo Connell, as Kevin McShane says, the worst improv team name ever. Can't spell it, can't pronounce it.
Sounds like you're choking.
Yeah, that was sort of our first two-person, because we were like, what's our show going to be? And I described a bunch of two-person shows I knew, and he really clicked on playing multiple characters, and either one of us being able to play the other person's character. So Gargiulo Connell was 2 actors, 1 location, a cast of thousands is how we put it, and then going back and forth. I did that. Obviously, me and Jeff Hawkins with Billy Hawk, very much Miles inspired. Me and Miles had one for a while called the Billy Miles. Here and there we've done it again, but like the reason why Heather and Miles is better than the Billy Miles is because with me and Miles it's just 2 Miles. But Heather and Miles, you have Heather bouncing off of all that, and then Miles just sort of like, my favorite thing that Heather does is her impression of Miles.
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit down in this chair. You're gonna do all the wacky shit around me. I'm tired. All right, I'm gonna play, but I'm not gonna try. It's 11 o'clock on a Wednesday. I'm furious that I'm awake.
I miss my porch.
I miss my porch. Oh, they're going first. Great. I'm gonna go in the back, have a cigarette.
Yeah.
20 minutes. All right, come out. He'll catch the end of their set. You're not better than me, Heather. And then they just go out,
explode,
and kill.
Kill it.
Yeah, Billy Miles. Me and Miles won 4 UCB cage matches before we lost.
So then, talk to me about you started the Pack Theater with Miles.
Yes, with me, Miles, Heather, Eric Moneypenny, Sam Brown came a little bit after that. There's another founding member who I'll never speak of.
What was the impetus for that? Walk me through the origins.
Sharna. He came back to teach. He didn't want to teach anymore. And he goes, all right, this is what I want. I want this amount of money per head. I think it was like $50. I can't remember what it was. And then lasted literally 1 pay cycle. I came back to do Armando, and he was in the green room, and the checks had just come in. So everyone goes up and gets their check out of the booth. And comes in, he's like, is there something off for your check? And I was like, no, my check was right. Like, this isn't right. And then he called Sharna, and she was like, oh, no, you had 12 people in class, but 9 of them are interns, so I'm only paying you for 3.
No.
And he's like, that's not how that works. She's like, well, they're taking the class for free. He was like, they're not taking the class for free. You're getting free labor for them. You're getting value for it. And he was like, that was the final straw. He was like, never again. So he went off and started the Miles Stroth workshop, which is just him. He's like, hey, I'm teaching classes at the complex on Santa Monica if you want it. And I think for like the first 2 years, he might have just been teaching like the same 6 people over and over again. But he was just like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it on my own. If I'm not going to make no money, then at least I don't have to have that kind of overhead.
Right. He gets to be the boss.
Yeah. And then slowly but surely, he brought in Heather to teach sketch. And then he brought me in to teach forms. And then Heather started getting super busy. And she brought in Eric Moneypenny because they were on the Midnight Show together. Then Sam Moneypenny brought Sam in. And then so on and so forth. And that's just eventually we got to the point where he called me up and he was like, we're going to start doing shows. There's too many students and they're all bothering me to do shows. And we have a couple teams now. So it's going to be Long Hard Tuesdays and you're going to run it. And I was like, well, it's a good thing you're you because I have a great ioWest house sketch team that I direct called Super Kudzu. And they understood. I was like, sorry, guys. They're like, well, it's Miles. Of course you have to go do that. And eventually once we decided we were going to go to 7 days a week, Miles was like, this is too big. It's too important to me. People, again, Miles is one of the most decent, honest, moral, ethical human beings I've ever met in my life. So he was like, too many people working too hard for free. Can't be named after me. So we went through like 250 names. At one point we were going to be the Hammerstone Theater, which thank God we weren't that.
Where'd that come from?
I think Moneypenny had an idea for that. It was Hammerstone is like the earliest example of a tool. Literally, you just have a rock and you're using it to hammer things.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. But Hammerstone Theater sounds so aggressive.
Yeah. Also, there's a pro wrestler name by the name of Hammerstone.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm like, oh man, I'm glad we didn't do that. And so then the pack, and then that's how that came. And that
speaks to Miles' description of team feeling like a gang.
Yeah, the strength of the wolf is the pack.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff that we say. Don't be boring.
Yeah, I want to hear what are the 10 pole philosophies of the pack. I know you're off on your own now, and I want to talk about that too. But what were the sort of core philosophies?
The core philosophy. Public facing was evolve. We evolve the work. We're trying to push it forward. We're trying to do something different with it. We want to encourage you to do that different with it. We do not compete with other improv theaters in town. We complement them. We're not here to take anybody away from anything. Study everywhere, take classes everywhere. We are friends with all those people. We love it. And when you're ready to like sort of work on just sort of you, then you come to us and we'll sort of curate and you give you those things. Miles' big thing was always like you learn freedom, then you learn form and structure, and then you just play. And that's kind of how we had it set it up. We had someone teaching like an annoyance style for level 1, like do anything. And then I would teach forms and then you would get Miles. And you could also take us in any structure you wanted to. Our internal one was don't be boring. You can do whatever you want, but like pitch us something interesting, pitch us something you're passionate about. When I was the AD there, in all terms but name, my thing was always heart, hustle, house in that order. If you're super passionate about something, I would book months in advance. I would book X months in advance. If they were every day going like 63 days until our first show and like all that versus the day of being like, is anybody available to do it? I'm like, okay. Then, if you're passionate about something and you work real hard to promote it, the audience will eventually come. And I don't care if you're playing to 6 people for an entire year. Like I'll keep booking you because there's clearly something out there. Eventually someone else will discover your genius. And then Ali Farnakian, who did the Pit, the People's Improv Theater, he and Miles were on The Family together. So he came out and did a show. I sat with him. It's one of my favorite nights of improv ever. It was me, Miles, Ali, and Dan. Yeah, real nice. Me, Dan, Miles, and Heather used to do a show called Mud that no one ever saw, and it's probably the best improv I'll ever do in my life.
If I had a time machine, I didn't know about it.
Yes, my favorite. Well, it was Friday night at 10 o'clock in the DCT, so no one would show. But also, it fits my philosophy. My personal philosophy is I always want to be the least talented and least experienced person on stage, and that was real easy.
Is that sort of the same thing as like play chess with people who are better than you?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
So those are sort of the overall philosophies. And then Ali was so taken and so loved like our vibes, for lack of a better term. he got a nice the Rudyard Kipling the Law of the Jungle, or that poem where it ends with, "And the strength of the wolf is the pack," which is ironic because our logo is actually a hyena. And he had that framed and sent it to us, and then we hung that up. You go through the lobby, and that's the first thing you see in the theater is that quote. And so everyone sort of took that and made it a hashtag. So I think that's probably about right. Yeah, and then I sort of stepped down from my official duties in March 2nd of 2019 and passed it on to Alyssa Phillips, our official first artistic director. And then, yeah, I'm sort of just an editor emeritus now. When people, every once in a while, someone will come and, hey, can I take you out to a happy hour? Can I buy you a coffee and pick your brain? I had a question about this. Less and less over the years, just because as I get further away and less people know who I am at the PAC, which is, if you're healthy enough that you don't know who the hell I am, that's a good theater. And also there's a certain amount of entitlement too, of like, well, that's how you did it, old man. I think we have I'm like, all right, you don't want to know this institutional knowledge? You want to make all my same mistakes again? That is also part of the learning process. Have at it.
And now you're traveling around teaching on your own. What are you teaching? Are you teaching forms? Are you teaching scene work? What's your bag?
Yeah, some of that came from, so I'm part of Camp Improv Utopia as well, with Nick Armstrong and Jessica Young and all those cats.
Do you guys still do camp every year?
I'm going Memorial Day.
Oh, cool.
Like 3 weeks.
I did that one year, and it was one of the coolest experiences of my life.
I'm stunned that we keep doing it. Yeah, we have the 4 camps now. So Camp West, East, Yosemite, and then we moved the Ireland camp to Spain. It's been in Spain for the last couple of years.
And just for the listeners, this is Camp Improv Utopia, founded by Nick Armstrong. It's a camp where people go, and is it 3 days long or longer now?
3 days, 4 days, 3 nights.
4 days, 3 nights. Yeah. He gets a bunch of improv instructors. You take workshops for the weekend, but you also do camp stuff like archery and hikes and axe throwing. Yeah. And you stay in cabins, and there's shows every night and jams, and it's very cool. It's like a festival, but isolated at a summer camp.
Yeah, it keeps building and growing and adding new like sort of traditions. So I always say it's an adult summer camp for improvisers or comedy fans. So between that and then going to like all the festivals, like you have done as well. I think I've gone like 150 or something now over the last 20 some years. I kept running into people who were like, "We'd love to bring someone like you in, or someone like Susan Messing, or Susie Barrett, or Karen Gracci, or Rosowski."
Thanks for shoehorning me in there.
Of course, have to.
Yeah.
I think so. I wouldn't blow smoke up your ass, Susie.
I wish you would. I have a lot of money. I could pay you to do that. It sounds like it would feel good.
I need the work. It sounds like it'd feel good.
Doesn't it? Smoke just shooting up into your ass.
But so many of these people would reach out and be like, "Hey, we would love to have someone like you come in, but we're a very small theater, or we have a very small community. We couldn't afford it." And so in the spirit of yes and, I was like, all right, well, how do we solve this? And then I also saw, not this past fall, but the one before that, I was like, this strike is going to happen, and it's going to be long. And I need to get out ahead of this because all the survival jobs will be even harder to get. And so my thing, I was like, all right, well, I teach position play and deconstruction. I got that from Miles. I have the ladder, which I invented.
Pause for a second. What is position play?
Position play is something that Miles invented. He did not invent the scene types, but he invented the language used to describe what we call at the PAC Theater, the scene dynamics. And the basic idea behind it is that 99.99% of the time you're going to find yourself in one of 4 basic scene types on an improv show. That is on stage. That's logical, absurd. Used to be called straight absurd, but I asked his permission to change it to logical, and he agreed. Character-driven, alternate reality, and realistic. And each one of them have 1, 2, at most 3 tools and techniques you have to use to execute that type of scene, and then everything else is gravy. Logical, absurd is just pure game. UCB, hit, back off, hit, back off. A lot of time I often use that. I use an example of yours from camp when I was watching you teach your workshop about the idea of every Muppet is a game to themselves. And so Kermit is the logical position, and then every game is based on who the absurdity come into. Him and Gonzo is different than him and Piggy. Right? And then character-driven scene is just mirrors of each other. Mirror and heighten your peas in a pod, your point of, shared point of view, absurd. Alternate reality scenes, if this is true, what else is true? Mapping, consistency, those cover all of your genres. Your improvise, fill in the blank, Tennessee Williams, Harry Potter, Star Wars, but also covers your crazy town of Pikachu and John Rambo are holed up in a Whole Foods fighting off a zombie apocalypse, right? That Paul Valancourt triangle of the scene. I also use your stuff of like, all right, now we know how Susie Barrett's a logical, every Muppet is game. But if you put those Muppets together, the Muppet Show is an alternate reality. All of them work together. We're all agreeing that we know that there are types of variety shows. So if this is true, then what else is true? Well, we're mapping onto that all the old vaudeville stuff, but we're making them puppets, and since we're consistent with it, that's why you forget that they're puppets.
Right. And in this reality, rats can ride bicycles next to humans.
Fantastic. And no one works. Right. Everyone is super attracted to Miss Piggy, and it's just a thing.
Right. Yeah. And Charles Grodin is believably taken by her beauty. Yeah.
And if you bring up bestiality, you're the asshole.
You're the unusual one in the scene. Right.
And then realistic scenes is being truthful up to including your own real name and providing specifics and details, preferably from your own life. And that covers all your dramatic improv, your gravid waters, where you're trying to do something that feels like it's scripted, feels like it's grounded. Something like Stolen House that like Bob and Steph and TJ and all those guys do, where they take a set from a play that they have, that there's a play going up in a theater. They enter in the back. They've rented out that space. No one in the improv cast has seen that set before. They come out, they get a suggestion, and then they improvise a 2-act play in that set from scratch.
Brilliant. Do they still do that?
They've done it a couple times in Chicago and New York mostly.
God, I want to see that.
Bob and Steph have done it. TJ, Scott Adsit is a regular in it. Pasquazi for sure. And then like they'll cycle in like Pete Groats or Lutz or any of those old school, Jazz Freddy types and beyond. So that's position play. Those are the 4. And so the faster you recognize what kind of scene you're in, the faster you can realize how to execute it. And then you're just relieving all this pressure off yourself to come up with like, oh God, there's a million choices. There's not. There's just really sort of a few choices. And then it's just, there are options more than choices. And that's just because of like, all right, what you think is funny. I usually tell people it's not comedy math. I hate math. I would never ask you to do math. It's just comedy truth. And it's practical application. Here's how a hammer works. Here's how a screwdriver works. Here's how a wrench works. Now that you know that, you're no longer going to be trying to hammer a nail in with the back end of a screwdriver, which is plastic and round and is not as effective. Now go build whatever house you think.
And it's a different way of thinking about support. What does this scene need? Based on my scene partner's initiation or the way that they're playing, what can I assume about this reality? There's a vibe to supporting that, it's not right or wrong. Yeah, we can do anything, but there is like, you don't want to try to put a square peg in a round hole. No. It'll be harder for you and your scene partner and for the audience who's also trying to agree with this reality. They want to come on board.
I usually point out, like, hey, like Oppenheimer, you expect Albert Einstein to show up, right? Like that makes sense, even though Einstein is sort of like a cultural character as well as being like a person who actually lived. If Ronald McDonald showed up, wouldn't you be like, what is this fucking movie?
Right.
What are you doing? It's the same thing here. Like just make people show up. But then also the great thing, I still think improv is the greatest art form in the world because we can get away with things that no other art form can. So you can do like UCB, the television series, first season, Matt Walsh has that great like black and white short film documentary of Albert Einstein at home, and it's all voiceover, and at one point it's him in the bath and him like hitting the side of the tub, and you just hear the voiceover. It's like, you've got to stop masturbating, Albert. It's making you lazy. So it's like, you can start with Oppenheimer and you expect Albert Einstein to be there, and then you travel off with Albert. One of the best ones I ever saw was it was an Armando. I forget who the 2 people were. I think one was Stephanie Weir. I can't remember the other ones. Clearly an anniversary dinner at a fancy restaurant. Clearly the marriage is over. They're finally having that conversation. She's crying. He's like, I don't know what you want me to say. And then Mike Cohen, perfect, underrated ninja that he is, comes in. He goes, I just want to let you both know that the souffle does take 45 minutes to prepare, so you'll need to order at the beginning of your meal, and then walks away. And I just go, yes, that's so funny. But also like, he's worked in fine dining for like 20 years. I'm like, of course. It's like, this marriage is over. They're not ordering dessert. What are we doing?
So
to me,
funny.
That's a realistic scene. And then it becomes alternate reality later on when you like tag in and be like, we got to let you go. Why? You need to do a better job of reading the room. As a waiter, you're just terrible at this. And then you go home and then he's like, all right, I have some bad news, Dracula. I got fired today. No, how will we ever pay for the rent? And then you're off and running. It's storytelling. It's just position plays storytelling. What do they want on it? I read that, and then I read Stephanie Streisand's pilot structure notes. I don't make any money from this. She teaches the pack, but I don't get any kickbacks. Best $50 I ever spent. And then Eric Moneypenny's sketch packet. These are the 5 sketches. These are how you write them. This is why it works. Just ride the horse the right way. Don't try. I'm going to reinvent comedy. You're not. This is how it works. Just do it. I read those 2 things, and then I refresh myself in position play before I write anything now, because it just works.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned a few minutes ago you were talking about a form you invented called the ladder.
Yes.
I don't know this form. Tell me about it.
Because I invented it, and very few people know about it. So ladder was an exercise that I did with a 2-person duo called Daddy's Home. That was Debbie Fry and Alison Reinhold, who's a great stand-up now. She talks a lot about her recovery from alcoholism and stories. And that started off as a exercise, and that grew into their form. And then I wrote it I got their permission I'm like, can I have this and run with it? Because we rehearsed a bunch, and I don't think they ever did a show. So it was like, perfect duo. And they were like, yeah, I mean, you created it, to give it to us. I'm like, well, we developed it together. Like, nah, it was yours. I was like, okay. And so the idea behind the ladder is just basically, I wrote a couple of plays just to make sure it worked. The idea behind the ladder is I have a very low bar to what I consider to be a successful improv scene, which is, did the 2 or more people on stage plus the audience have a basic idea of what they were trying to do, like what you were going for. Like, you guys were in a haunted house, right? Like, yes, thank you. And everything after that is just reps and experience and talent. And then same thing, the low bar I have for an improv show is I just want to see something that's being done on purpose. And so the ladder was like this. I was like, here's the just base minimum you need to tell a story narratively where people will look at it and go, that was done on purpose. It's not just a montage or a mono scene that okay, now it's over. So it's just the idea that there's 3 worlds, world A, world B, world C. They never interact. So don't think of second beats in a Herald where they have to start overlapping. They do not. They never will. These are 3. This is going to the Los Feliz 3. You're either going to go see this movie, or this movie. These characters never come across. There's 4 characters in each world. Everyone can remember 4 characters. And there's 7 scenes. And they always go in order. World A, World B, World C. World A, scene 1. World B, scene 1. World C, scene 1. World A, scene 2. And the 7 scenes are just the first 2 lead characters. Here's He-Man and Skeletor. He-Man wants to rule Eternia. Skeletor wants to rule Eternia, but evil. Right? I'll kill you, He-Man. Oh, never. Scene 2 is one of those lead characters and a supporting character that we haven't seen before that would have skin in the game, that would care. He-Man and his best friend Tila, his right-hand man, right? I'm just saying, for someone you hate, you talk about him a lot. No, because I have to fight him. You've had other enemies, but, not this long. And then scene 3 would be the other lead character, Skeletor, and a supporting character we haven't seen up to this point who would have skin in the game, Beastman. His main henchman. I'm just saying, I've never heard you talk about anyone this long. No, I hate He-Man. He should die. Right? Okay. Scene 4 is the 2 supporting characters. And I use this a lot in my pilot writing. Some features too, but for pilots, I'll go through and I'll put the characters through the ladder. I'm like, do these characters have, even if it's a scene that hasn't been written yet, or a scene that will never happen, could these 2 characters be in a scene together? Are the characters strong enough that they're not just a funny game or a funny bit that I like? So it's all right, the 2 supporting characters, Tila and Beastman, just fuck and get it over with. I know this is gonna mess up our bowling league. We're in the semis on Wednesday night. If these guys keep fighting, we can't. Yeah, I know we can't be there. We'll never hear the end of it. And then scene 5 and scene 6 is just the combination of lead and supporting character we haven't seen up to that point. Skeletor and Tila. I'm just saying, if you asked him on a date, he wouldn't say no. No way. Seriously? He's never talked about. And then the other one is He-Man and Beastman. Yeah. I was just like, well, what would we even do? He loves bowling. This Wednesday night, he's open.
Go to him.
Yes, go to him. And then scene 7 is those 2 lead characters back together, infused, informed, and infected from all the other stuff we saw. I mean, we don't have to sword fight today if you don't want to. I was just so crazy. I was thinking about, we have the exact same sword. Have you seen that? No. Oh my God, it does. It matches.
Oh, we just both reached for it at the same time.
Yeah. And then it's like, what? Would you like to go bowling? I fucking love bowling. So you tell that whole story, but in piecemeal with the other story of just 2 people, you and me going to a hat shop trying to buy a hat, but then we locked our keys in the car. Oh God, I'm gonna go get somebody, and I'll come back. Right.
And so ladder A, let's say, was the He-Man thread.
Skeletor, yeah.
Yeah. Ladder B is me and you
going to a
the hat
store.
shop.
Yeah.
But do we put that through an entire ladder as well?
But in order, yeah. So you'd see the first scene with He-Man and Skeletor. Then you'd see the scene with you and I locking our keys in the car at the hat store. The third scene would be the femme fatale showing up at the private detective's office in a film noir. We would go back to He-Man and Skeletor, but with He-Man.
So this is
Teela.
like an hour-long show.
I've done it in a half hour as well.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got a couple of groups I've taught it to. So there's a duo in Tucson, Arizona, that do a 2-person one, but they only do one ladder. They just do the 7 scenes with 4 characters. And then there's a duo in Portland, out of the Kickstand Theater that Christian Scheer and Dylan Reif and the rest of those guys run.
Love those guys.
They do two worlds, not all 3. And then I just taught this in a bunch of different places. It's just a nice way to be like, hey, if you don't like group games, there's no organic openings. There's none of that in here. It's 3 scenes is just about 3-act structure. You know, you've done television a ton. 3-act structure is just 3 scenes is just enough for the people to like, oh yeah, He-Man and Skeletor, because you go back to it and it's always in order. You're never, and it's 12 characters. You know, if there's 6 or 7 people on the team, everybody gets to do a couple of characters. You get to dive down a little bit more. We practice what we preach when we talk about, you know, relationship and character and wants and history and choose to know and also like inch wide and mile deep, all that stuff. And you can tell a believable, recognizable story that you can show to literally anyone who has never seen improv before on the planet.
And it's a comforting form to be like, I don't have to think of where to go to explore this story. I know now it's going to be this character and this character B and character C are going to talk. Yeah.
It takes away all the other stuff. It's like you just have to do the scene with this character next. And so your focus is already literally on what's my relationship? What do I get along with them? Why would I what do I want from them, and how would they frustrate that want or give me what I want?
Yeah. I'm still hung up on it's 21 scenes if you do all 3 ladders.
Yeah.
So there's shorter scenes than what you might see in a Herald.
You start like Miles likes to say that all improv starts off slow and smart and ends fast and funny, no matter what show you're doing. And it's the same thing. If you do a Herald, the first beats, how many shows have we been in like in the green room beforehand? It's like, all right, let's leave the first couple scenes alone.
Let them breathe.
Take your time. Same thing in the ladder. The first couple are usually anywhere from 2.5, maybe even 3 minutes. And as you go along, by the last ones, 30 seconds, show over.
Right, because you don't need much to be like, you have the same sword. I love you. Bowling. Yeah.
But also you don't have to like start over and tell everybody. That's a lot what I see. They're not mistakes or traps. A lot of times when I travel, I see this everywhere, but especially when I travel with less experienced improvisers or who people haven't been lucky enough to have the teaching that you and I have had, the murder's row of teachers that we've had in Chicago and LA or wherever, they'll either start every scene with like, thank you so much for agreeing to meet me here. It's like always at the beginning. There's no in media res. Or 18 minutes into a 24 or 25 minute set, they're introducing brand new characters with brand new history that we've never met before. I'm like, you're never gonna have the time to pay that off. When you watch the pilot of Friends, 18 minutes into 22 minutes, they're not like, and me, Jeff, the 7th friend that's gonna be on every season for the next decade, right? Like that. Stop introducing people late. The ladder sort of forces them, even if they never do the form, forces them like, oh right, callbacks don't just mean jokes. They mean like bring back the characters that we might give a shit about, and what do they care about, and why, like reinvest in those instead of introducing brand new characters that you have 6 minutes until the end of your show. You're just never, ever going to pay that off.
I like it even as an exercise, even for a rehearsal, just to see like what the chemistry is between different character combos. Okay, now let's see this person with this person. Like, how do they explore
It's just an expanded version of what you're talking about with Every Muppet Is Game and Valancourt's like triangle the scene thing. And that's why I say I use it before I use it as a tool for my writing, especially in pilots where I'm like, all right. So if there's a character that's like, oh, is this just a thing that I think is funny? Okay, I'll get rid of that character. I'll give that scene or that affectation or world point of view. I'll add that to one of my lead or supporting characters to make them stronger. I've either gotten page weight back where I can like, all right, well now I can introduce a brand new character that's more fun. But it saves me a lot of time. That and position play and the deconstruction saves me a lot of time when I'm writing, banging my head against the wall, going like, why doesn't this scene work? Why doesn't this character work? Why doesn't this relationship work? It's like, just run it through the ladder real quick.
Yeah, and how do we deepen these characters?
exactly.
What do you bring to any team that you play on? What is your style, or what is your superpower as an improviser?
Oh man, that's tough. I guess my superpower is that I have like just an insane psychopathic memory of all this different stuff, and so I'm like sort of like Phil Hartman's my guy, the glue guy, right? You know, the Guardo Camino. And so I'm always out there just trying to fill in. I mean, I started as an incorrigible pirate, became more of a robot when I started working with Miles and decon and position play, and like, you know, using stuff like my film editing degree and all that. Oh, okay, you know.
Yeah,
then,
when I've played with you, I was and this is a compliment, but
thank you.
Starts with what maybe it sounds like not a compliment. I was so surprised at how insanely supportive you are.
Oh, thank you.
One of the most supportive players I've ever played with. And
thank you. That means a lot coming from you.
Oh my God, you were
sincerely.
And even just watching you on a back line, just like at the ready and so intently listening to everything, watching everything. And it's interesting seeing an example of your memory work here today with the Zumpf show. I'm like, oh, that is the ultimate support tool because you can remember any little thing that anybody has said and then tie it into anything else.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a blessing and a curse because, you know, every once in a while, Liz will be, my girlfriend is like half joking, half not. She'll be like, I mean, of course, if it was an improv show from 11 years ago, you would remember that. I was like,
too bad our anniversary isn't a line from a cage match.
Okay, yes.
2002.
Not far off.
Right.
Not far off. But I think that's fair.
In scene work, do you have a specific or a particular style that you lean towards? Are you a more emotional player? Are you a more cerebral player?
The dragon that I'm trying to chase always is I'm trying to make, I think the deconstruction is the one act unscripted play about the dark joy of the human condition. I believe I create dark joy, whereas I fill in other places. So it's like there are scenes where people go, oh God. The audience member drives home and goes, you have a good relationship with your father, don't you? Like, I'm like, I want that. And I want people to come up. Like, I want you and I to do a scene in a show and you and I walk off and like, oh, it was pretty good. Like, yeah, it kind of felt like it didn't feel like improvisers pretending to be characters. It just felt like characters. And then someone comes up after us and is like, excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, great show. Thank you so much. Did she finish that novel? Like, you know, like, yes. Like, actually she did. And it did so well that she was able to write a second
creating
one.
a show where the characters are so real.
They live beyond
live
us. And then that person runs. We've had the great point to like make that person's day. And then they like run back to their group and like, I told you. You owe me $5. She totally finished that novel. Right? That's what I'm sort of looking for. So like, I kind of want it to look like, I don't know, theater. I want it to look like play. I want people to watch it the same way and lose their suspension of disbelief the same way you do in a movie. Like, for lack of a better term.
You want your fellow players and the audience to buy into a reality that you've created.
And I think that's the stuff that you and I sort of, for lack of a better term, grew up watching, like watching all those heavy hitters. I'm not watching Bob and Steph do a weird ass show and being like, great technique. See what you did there. You're just like, this is why married couples great improvising. Like that feels real. I asked Bob about that once. I said, does Stephanie ever get mad at you about something you bring up from your guys' real life on stage? And he goes, well, the only way for anyone to know that it was real is if she got mad about it. And I was like, oh, well played. well threaded needle, Bob. He was like, all right. So long story short, to come back around, that's all my stuff. I travel, I teach all those places because they were like, we'd love to bring you someone in. And so I came up with this sort of, the first one we did is the Rust Belt Tour. I'm on the board of directors of a nonprofit theater in Baltimore called Highwire Improv now.
Cool. And
I had this idea and I just mentioned it in passing, and Barry Wright III, our chairman, was like, can that be like a Highwire thing? Because part of their goal of bringing me on as a board member is like, you know everybody, and we're trying to get known. So you go everywhere, you can spread the word of Highwire. So we did, the first one was called the Rust Belt Tour. I emailed 41 different theaters between Buffalo, New York, and Green Bay, Wisconsin, and said, hey, here's the idea. Everybody wants guest artists, not everyone can afford it, but if we split the cost, the most expensive thing is travel and lodging. I need a one-way ticket from wherever I'm starting and a one-way ticket back from wherever I end. I'm low maintenance. I do not need to, if I'll stay in someone's spare bedroom. I'll stay in a room above the theater. If someone has a bunch of points and can put me up in a hotel in exchange for taking the class for free, great. Here is my very low key. I need $50 a head, and I need to make it. You guarantee me 12, $600. If only 9 people show up for it, you still pay me as if there's 12. So a $500 or $400 round trip ticket, or 2 one-way tickets from this place to this place, and then a couple of buses or trains or whatever in between, or someone, again, takes the class for free and drives me for 2 hours to the next town. We're splitting that 5, 6, 7 ways. Very affordable now for everybody. But also things of like, hey, I'd really appreciate it if there was not it would be open for everybody. If there's 3 theaters in town, I wish all the theaters can take part of it. I don't want to do any non-compete clauses. And hopefully, my idea was Black Flag and SST records in the early 80s. There was no punk rock clubs. And so they just went and played anywhere and got in the van. And then they sort of carved out a touring circuit for that type of music, which then the Green Days and the Blink-182s and what could follow along. If you play in the basement of a 16-year-old kid has you play in his parents' basement house, 5 years later, he's 21, he's a promoter at a local club. Yeah. And then, so I'm like, hopefully the idea is that I can establish this sort of tour and circuit, prove up the concept so that they're able to, those theaters know each other, can work together, and bring in bigger and better names than me with better resumes. That is what I would consider to be successful as a legacy of like, people just have these little tour circuits now that they can do, because like, how did this all start? Oh, BOC did this back in like 2000.
Yeah, the wagon tracks are there.
Yeah.
And all the other wagons
that's the
can
hope.
follow.
So,
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to plug?
The real Brian James O'Connell, that's on YouTube. That's my page. There's a playlist I have called All Improv Plus. There's Paramount Plus, there's Disney Plus. Why not us, right?
Great.
All Improv Plus has everything, tons of improv shows that people have recorded, tons of TED Talks, interviews, all that stuff. It's at like 1,356 videos now, and it's a living document. Amazing. I keep adding to it every day. So that's the idea. So the same way we were talking before with Ryan, like, I wish I had this when I was going to have all this stuff. I'm like, dude, I'm putting it together. Right. It exists.
Yeah.
Well, so people get that.
That plus the 12 episodes of this podcast.
Oh, it's getting added to it. This podcast is, once you give me the official links, I'm adding that to the All Improv PDF so people can find it.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And yeah. If you have a question about improv that you would like me to ask a future guest, email it to yesalsopod@gmail.com and I will get it on the show. If you're a fan of the show, follow us on Instagram at yesalsopod. And please help us out by liking, rating, reviewing, clicking, sending, talking, and blasting us to your improv communities. That will help us out a lot. If you're a theater who would like to host us for a live recording and improv show, let us know at yesalsopod@gmail.com. A huge shout out to Ryan Rosenberg, who produced this thing with his generous help and his unlimited knowledge about all things podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. No, we won't, Susie. That's not how podcasts work. They will see. They won't even see us. They will listen to us. So it's actually the opposite of both things you said. Thanks for listening, and you will listen to us next week. Maybe. We don't know.